Hi, I'm Dave from Split. Recently I sat down with Gene Steiner and Mike Sherov from Skillshare, an online learning community with millions of members and thousands of classes for creative and curious people. Gene is VP of Data and Mike is VP of Engineering at Skillshare. I asked them why they implemented Split and how they use Split to run experiments and practice continuous delivery safely. This isn't the first rodeo for Gene or Mike, so I think you'll find their thoughts on moving from an in-house tool to Split valuable no matter how much experience you have going in. Here's Gene.
We knew that we needed Split for several things. One is just for how we develop software and to be able to have the feature flagging capability. And then second, to be able to run A/B tests. And I would say that, from a business standpoint, that actually was the thing that I think helped us get over the edge of bringing in a solution like this, because being able to really understand when we make changes, how do our users respond? What's the best change for our users? And how can we really help our users, satisfy their creative journey as well as possible?
The industry best practices these days, they talk about like cycle time and amount of time it takes from the first commit on a developer's machine to when it's in production. And like for definition of what in production means, it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be live to all users, but you should be able to, as an engineer, test that in production. And that's like been proven, by the team at Accelerate and by the Dora report, State of DevOps, just like tons of research now about cycle time as being the best predictor of engineering team success. And so I knew we needed feature flags for that. Our other A/B testing framework that we had internal allowed you to like roll out to 25% of users or 50% of users, like
50.
Something divided by like base 2 or whatever, like cut in half. So like we had some rudimentary stuff there, nothing that would stand any form of like statistical rigor or being able to roll out to a small percentage. But like the actual killer feature for me was around feature flagging. We had no way to say, like, don't do this in production unless you happen to be one of these user IDs, or don't do this unless you happen to have this certain IP address. We were doing continuous integration and continuous delivery, but we didn't have things like feature flags in place that would like allow us to do that safely. So we'd still deploy things continuously, but we would deploy like 10,000 lines of code at once. And I'd be like, okay, well, this is like 3 or 4 months worth of work. Maybe we should like QA this in a production environment first. And so the feature flag thing, I think, was, for me, order one. Feature flags allows you to develop incomplete features going out to production one pull request at a time. And so you get better reviews, you get better feedback from your teammates, you get a sandbox in which product managers and the rest of your team can kind of view this thing and know that it's in production infrastructure, which is a big relief. At a previous employer, we were doing like build nights, once a week builds. And when we finally got feature flags, we moved to like building, continuously. And like build night became this thing of like a distant memory where like 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, because that's when traffic was lowest, we'd like order pizzas and the engineers stay late in case the deployment that goes out like caused major havoc for the users, right? So like it really is just like a complete culture shift in terms of separating out deployment from software release. And that's the key thing of feature flags, is that you no longer have a coupling between deployment and release.
I think that the benefits for being able to QA in a real production environment have been, we don't track how many times we find stuff that would have been a user-facing problem, but it's so frequent and we couldn't have done that before. So that's also huge. And we've also found that with some of the A/B tests at the rollout to a small percentage, we've also been able to, catch stuff. You catch stuff in QA and then you catch stuff when actual users hit it.
There are certain table stakes that you need to have. And I think feature flags has just become such a bedrock principle at this point of modern software development with CI/CD that if you're not doing it at this point, you're just being dangerous. I feel like spending so much time fighting fires or things that go wrong, even with a CI/CD process, that the amount of time you spend actually learning stuff is diminished.
There's also kind of a cultural piece that I think is important. When you think about like that philosophy and going quickly, it's going quickly to make that user experience better. And I think that's something that we do really well at Skillshare, which is that we have a really tight collaboration with engineering and data and product. And that allows us to really, it's like, no, there's not this clear pass off. Oh, okay, like I got this thing out the door and now it's your job. That we're really collaborating together. And so that allows us up front to say, what metrics do we think are going to move in which ways? Now that we have, we set something out either to a smaller traffic percentage or once it's kind of in a full power traffic percentage. And now we can actually see, did it move the way we expected or not? And that allows us to actually, kind of always put the user first in everything that we're doing and be able to measure. And I think that piece, because we have a very integrated team, makes, it means we have more eyes and more ideas on what could be going wrong or right.
I'd also just say that A/B testing is a side effect of controlled release. And that's what I love the most about Split is that it's kind of a Trojan horse there where you say like, oh, okay, like let's develop this thing behind a feature flag, right? Even if someone is not considering necessarily running it as an A/B test. And it becomes a really short conversation to say like, well, did you consider maybe running this as an A/B test for real? And it becomes a really short cognitive like leap to make to say, okay, yeah, why not, right?
We did a whole brand refresh at the end of December and the beginning of January.
There was no feature freeze. Like we didn't do a feature freeze for the rest of the organization while literally like, they talk about doing feature flags as like swapping out jet engines while you're flying, but this is like swapping out the plane while you're flying.
If anything went off in the metrics, we were going to slow it down. We were going to wait and fix it and so on. And so doing it as an A/B test was really critical. And we didn't have a big time window to play with. So kind of a relatively fast but measured rollout of the A/B test for a few days, made sure that some core metrics looked like they were either improving or comparable, and then we went to 100%. And that cycle of developing behind the feature flags, and then and we had boatloads of company-wide QA parties, and then the A/B test gave us a lot of, visibility, protection, comfort in a huge change to our site.
It's hard to imagine how you would accomplish something like this without feature flags, without also feature freezing basically all other work, right? Some people will, just I think in general be like, oh, well, is it worth the rigmarole of adding a feature flag and then deploying the thing and then removing the feature flag and doing the whole thing? And it's like, when you show them that you could literally change your whole site out from underneath, and then like with a flip of a button is when the switch happens, rather than like one massive deploy where you hope you haven't broken anything. You have like your designers around the clock QA testing in production, this thing to know what other users are seeing. I think that was like a magical aha moment for the entire team. It's like, okay, yes, this is a thing that like it works for the biggest project, it works for the smallest project, and in fact, for the biggest projects, it's critical and impossible to do otherwise.